The dust-laden wind carried the scent of danger as Theodora Keller pressed her back against the train station wall, one hand gripping her worn leather suitcase, the other clutching a crumpled telegram, her last lifeline in this unforgiving territory. Montana Territory, 1878, was no place for a woman alone, but desperation had driven her west after her father's sudden death left her penniless and homeless in Boston. "Last call for Pine Ridge!" shouted the station master, eyeing Theodora with a mixture of curiosity and concern. She straightened her travel-worn dress, gathered her courage, and stepped forward into the blinding sunlight. The small frontier town sprawled before her, a single dusty street lined with wooden buildings, horses tied to hitching posts, and men whose weathered faces told stories of hardship and survival. Theodora's heart sank. This wasn't the promising new beginning her father's old friend had described in his letters. "Miss Keller?" A deep voice startled her from behind. She turned to face a tall man with broad shoulders, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of a summer storm. He stood with one hand resting casually on his holstered pistol, the other holding the reins of two horses, a magnificent black stallion and a gentle-looking chestnut mare. "Yes, I'm Theodora Keller," she replied, lifting her chin despite her nervousness. "Xavier Foster," he said, tipping his hat. "Sorry about your father. He was a good man." Theodora studied his face, searching for any resemblance to the kind gentleman who had corresponded with her father for years. "You're not Mr. Harrison?" A shadow crossed Xavier's features. "No, madam. I'm afraid Joseph Harrison passed 6 months ago. Pneumonia took him quick." He shifted uncomfortably. "I bought his ranch. Found your letters among his things. Figured somebody ought to let you know you still had a place to come to." The ground seemed to sway beneath Theodora's feet. Her carefully laid plans dissolved in an instant. "I see," she managed, fighting to maintain her composure. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Foster, but I wouldn't want to impose. Perhaps there's a boarding house in town where I could—" "Nearest proper boarding house is 2 days' ride," Xavier interrupted. "Harrison promised your father he'd look after you if anything happened. I bought that promise along with the land." His expression softened slightly. "The ranch has a small cabin where you can stay. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe." Theodora hesitated, weighing her options. Her funds would barely cover a week at even the most modest establishment, and the thought of being stranded in this wilderness terrified her. "Just until I can make other arrangements," she finally agreed. Xavier nodded, taking her suitcase and securing it to the chestnut mare. "This is Daisy. She's gentle as they come." He offered his hand to help Theodora mount. The ride to Xavier's ranch took nearly 2 hours, during which Theodora struggled to maintain her seat on the unfamiliar animal. Xavier rode slightly ahead, occasionally glancing back to ensure she was managing. They traveled in silence through rolling grasslands dotted with pine forests, crossing streams and climbing gentle slopes until finally cresting a hill that revealed a breathtaking view. Below them lay a picturesque valley cradling a modest but well-maintained ranch house, several outbuildings, and corrals holding horses and cattle. A creek wound through the property like a silver ribbon, and the setting sun painted everything in warm golden hues. "Harrison's Heaven," Xavier said quietly. "That's what Joseph called it." Theodora couldn't help but be moved by the beauty of the place. "It's lovely. It's home," he replied simply, urging his horse forward. As they approached the main house, a young man emerged from the barn, waving enthusiastically. "That's Zeke," Xavier explained. "Works the ranch with me. There's also Mrs. Wilkins who comes up from town twice a week to help with cooking and washing." Zeke hurried to take the horses as they dismounted. Theodora's legs trembled from the unaccustomed exercise, and she stumbled slightly. Xavier's hand shot out to steady her, his touch brief but strong. "Thank you," she murmured, embarrassed by her weakness. "You'll get your land legs soon enough," he said, his expression unreadable as he retrieved her suitcase. "Let me show you to the cabin." The cabin stood about 50 yards from the main house, a simple one-room structure with a small porch. Inside was sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove, and a chest of drawers. Bathroom's out back, Xavier explained, setting down her suitcase. There's fresh water in the pitcher, and I had Mrs. Wilkins stock some food in the cupboard. If you need anything else, just let me know. Theodora stood in the center of the room, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of her situation. Mr. Foster, I truly appreciate your hospitality, but I don't expect charity. I can work to earn my keep until I decide what to do next. Xavier studied her for a moment, taking in her delicate hands and city clothes. Can you cook? Yes, quite well actually. How about sewing? I'm proficient with a needle. Good. Mrs. Wilkins could use some help. She's getting on in years. He moved toward the door. Rest tonight. We can discuss arrangements tomorrow. After he left, Theodora sank onto the bed, exhaustion overtaking her. She hadn't expected luxury, but the stark reality of frontier life was jarring. Still, as she gazed out the small window at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky, she felt something unexpected, a flicker of hope. Morning came with the crowing of roosters and the distant lowing of cattle. Theodora dressed quickly in her plainest skirt and blouse, determined to prove her usefulness. Outside, the ranch was already alive with activity. Men on horseback moved among the cattle in distant pastures, while closer to the house, Zeke was chopping wood. She made her way to the main house, knocking tentatively on the back door. Come in, called a cheerful voice. Inside, she found a plump, gray-haired woman bustling around a large kitchen. You must be Miss Keller. I'm Eleanor Wilkins. The woman wiped her hands on her apron and extended one in greeting. Heard you arrived yesterday. Xavier says you know your way around a kitchen? Yes, madam. Theodora smiled, instantly warming to the woman's friendly manner. Thank the Lord. These men eat like there's no tomorrow, and these old bones aren't what they used to be. She gestured toward a pile of potatoes. Think you could peel those while I get the bread started? Theodora rolled up her sleeves and set to work. By the time the ranch hands came in for breakfast, she had helped prepare a hearty meal of fried potatoes, bacon, eggs, and fresh bread. Xavier entered last, pausing in surprise when he saw Theodora serving plates alongside Mrs. Wilkins. Their eyes met briefly before he took his seat at the head of the table. The men ate ravenously, complimenting the food between mouthfuls. When breakfast was finished, Mrs. Wilkins shooed them out. You're a godsend, my dear, she told Theodora as they washed dishes. I've been telling Xavier for months he needs more help around here, but he's stubborn as a mule. He seems reserved, Theodora ventured. Mrs. Wilkins sighed. He's had a hard road. Came west after the war with nothing but nightmares and determination. Built this place up from almost nothing after Joseph passed. She paused, studying Theodora. Don't let his gruffness fool you. He's got a good heart. Over the next few days, Theodora fell into a routine. Mornings were spent helping with meals and household tasks, afternoons often dedicated to mending clothes and linens that had accumulated in Mrs. Wilkins' absence. Xavier remained polite but distant, leaving early and returning late, speaking to her only when necessary. One afternoon, while hanging laundry, Theodora noticed Xavier in the corral, working with a young, spirited horse. She paused to watch as he moved with surprising gentleness, speaking softly to the nervous animal, his patience evident even from a distance. He's got away with the wild ones, Zeke commented, appearing beside her with an armload of firewood. That mare there? Nobody could get near her when we found her. Xavier spent weeks just sitting in the corral, letting her get used to him. He doesn't seem to have the same patience with people, Theodora observed. Zeke chuckled. Horses are simpler. They don't ask questions or make demands. He shifted the wood in his arms. But he's fair. Saved my hide when I was caught stealing food from his saddlebags 2 years back. Instead of turning me in, he offered me a job. That evening, Theodora decided to bring dinner to Xavier, who had skipped the meal to continue working with the mare. She found him in the barn, brushing down the animal with slow, methodical strokes. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, holding out a plate of stew and bread. Xavier looked surprised but set down the brush and accepted the offering. "Thank you." "She's beautiful," Theodora commented, nodding toward the mare. "She was half-starved when we found her, running with a wild herd." He stroked the horse's neck. "Someone hurt her bad. Takes time to earn back trust once it's been broken." Theodora sensed he wasn't just talking about the horse. "Mr. Foster, Xavier," he corrected quietly. "Xavier," she repeated, finding the name strangely intimate on her tongue. "I wanted to thank you properly for taking me in. I know it wasn't your obligation." He focused intently on his food. "Like I said, I bought Harrison's promises along with his land. Still, you've been very kind. I don't want to overstay my welcome." Xavier looked up, his gray eyes intense. "You're not overstaying anything. This place." He gestured vaguely. "It was meant for more than just me and a few ranch hands. Joseph always talked about it being a real home someday." "And what do you want it to be?" she asked softly. For a moment, vulnerability flickered across his features. "I never gave it much thought. Just trying to keep it running." He set down his empty plate. "You planning to leave soon?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know. I have nowhere specific to go." "Then don't." The words seemed to surprise him as much as her. He cleared his throat. "What I mean is, you're useful here. Mrs. Wilkins appreciates the help, and the men haven't eaten this well in months." Theodora felt a strange mixture of disappointment and relief. He wanted her to stay because she was useful, not because of any personal regard. "I'll consider it." "Thank you." As she turned to leave, Xavier called after her. "Theodora? There's a town social on Saturday. If you'd like to go." "Well, we usually all ride in together." She smiled. "I'd like that very much." Saturday brought clear skies and excitement. Theodora wore her best dress, a cornflower blue that matched her eyes, and pinned her honey blonde hair in a simple but flattering style. When she emerged from the cabin, she found Xavier waiting, dressed in clean clothes, his usually unruly dark hair combed back. For a moment he seemed speechless. "You look very nice," he finally managed. "Thank you. So do you." The town social was held in the newly constructed schoolhouse. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the crowd of ranchers, shopkeepers, and their families. A small band played lively tunes while children darted between the adults and tables laden with food. Xavier introduced Theodora to the townspeople, many of whom expressed surprise at seeing the typically solitary rancher in attendance. She quickly found herself surrounded by curious women eager for news from the East and fresh conversation. "Your Xavier's quite the catch," whispered a young woman named Mary. "Half the unmarried women in the county have set their caps for him, but he never shows interest." "Oh, he's not my Xavier," Theodora corrected quickly. "I'm just staying at his ranch temporarily." Mary raised a knowing eyebrow. "Is that so? Well, he hasn't taken his eyes off you all evening." Theodora glanced across the room to find Xavier indeed watching her, though he quickly looked away when their eyes met. Later, when the band struck up a waltz, Xavier approached her. "Would you care to dance?" Surprised, Theodora nodded, placing her hand in his outstretched one. His other hand settled at her waist as he guided her smoothly around the floor. "You dance very well," she commented, surprised by his grace. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "My mother insisted. Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a drunken bear." Theodora laughed. "She sounds like a wise woman." She was. The brief shadow that crossed his face told her his mother was no longer living. They continued dancing, conversation flowing more easily than it ever had before. Theodora learned that Xavier had grown up in Virginia, fought reluctantly for the Confederacy because his father insisted, and headed west immediately after the war, unable to face the devastation of his homeland. "I needed somewhere new," he explained. Somewhere without memories. And you found Harrison's heaven. Joseph was like the father I wished I'd had. Taught me ranching, trusted me with his dream. His expression grew somber. I still don't know if I'm doing it justice. I think you are, Theodora said sincerely. The ranch is beautiful and thriving. As the evening wore on, Theodora found herself enjoying Xavier's company more than she'd expected. Beneath his reserved exterior was a thoughtful, intelligent man with unexpected depths. On the ride home, Xavier drew his horse alongside hers. Did you enjoy yourself? Very much. Thank you for including me. Theodora. He hesitated. I'm not good with words, but I want you to know you're welcome to stay as long as you want. Not just because you're useful, but because… He trailed off, seemingly unable to find the right words. Because? She prompted gently. Because the place feels more like home with you in it, he finally said, his voice barely audible. Before she could respond, a flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed by a deafening crash of thunder. The sudden storm sent their horses into a panic. Theodora's mare reared, throwing her to the ground, where she landed with a sickening crack and a cry of pain. Xavier was at her side instantly. Don't move, he commanded, gently examining her. Where does it hurt? My ankle, she gasped, the pain bringing tears to her eyes. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets as Xavier carefully lifted her into his arms. The ranch is still a mile away. There's an old lion shack just over that ridge. We'll shelter there until the storm passes. The lion shack was little more than a one-room shelter for cowboys caught in bad weather, but it was dry and had a small fireplace. Xavier settled Theodora on a narrow cot before starting a fire and lighting a lantern. Kneeling beside her, he gently removed her boot and examined her swollen ankle. I don't think it's broken, but it's a bad sprain. He tore a strip from his shirt and carefully wrapped the injury. This should help until we can get you back to the ranch. Thank you, Theodora whispered, suddenly aware of their isolation and proximity. Xavier's face was just inches from hers, his usually guarded expression open with concern. I should have been more careful, he said, his voice rough with emotion. If anything had happened to you, it wasn't your fault, she assured him, impulsively reaching out to touch his cheek. Xavier went still at her touch, his eyes darkening. For a heartbeat, Theodora thought he might pull away, but instead, he turned his face slightly to press a kiss against her palm. Theodora, he murmured, her name a prayer on his lips. I've been fighting this since the day you arrived. Fighting what? She asked, though she already knew the answer. How much I want you to stay. Not as a guest, not as a worker, but as… He struggled for words. As what, Xavier? Instead of answering, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers, a kiss so gentle it was barely there. When she didn't pull away, he kissed her again, more firmly this time, his hand coming up to cradle her face. Theodora responded with a fervor that surprised them both, her arms winding around his neck, drawing him closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. I've never felt this way, Xavier confessed. It terrifies me. It terrifies me too, she admitted. I came west with nothing, expecting to stay with my father's friend. Instead, I found… She touched his face wonderingly. I found you. They spent the night in the lion shack, talking as the storm raged outside. Xavier shared his dreams for the ranch, expanding the herd, breeding horses, perhaps building a larger house someday. Theodora spoke of her life in Boston, her father's decline, and her fear of an uncertain future. You don't have to fear the future anymore, Xavier told her as dawn broke and the storm finally subsided. Not if you stay. As your guest? She asked. He shook his head slowly. This is your home too, Theodora. If you want it to be. When they returned to the ranch, Xavier carried Theodora straight to the main house rather than her cabin, ignoring the raised eyebrows of the ranch hands. Mrs. Wilkins clucked over Theodora's injury, preparing poultices and insisting she stay in the house where she could be properly cared for. To Theodora's surprise, Xavier moved her things from the cabin that same day, installing her in the comfortable guest room of the main house. "Just until your ankle heals," he explained, though the look in his eyes suggested other intentions. As days passed, Theodora found herself increasingly integrated into ranch life. Even with her injured ankle, she helped with household accounts, menu planning, and lighter tasks she could manage while seated. Xavier sought her opinion on ranch matters, valuing her practical suggestions and fresh perspective. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch watching the sunset, sometimes talking, sometimes enjoying comfortable silence. Occasionally, Xavier would read aloud from one of the books in Joseph's modest library, his deep voice giving life to the words. One evening, about 3 weeks after her fall, Theodora found Xavier in Joseph's study, examining a set of architectural drawings. "What are those?" she asked, curious. He looked up, slightly embarrassed at being caught. "Plans Joseph drew up years ago. For expanding the house." She moved closer to look. The drawings showed a spacious 2-story home with multiple bedrooms, a large kitchen, and wide porches. "He always hoped to have a family here," Xavier explained. "Said a real home needs children's laughter." Theodora studied his face, seeing the longing he tried to hide. "It's a beautiful dream, Theodora." He set down the plans and took her hands. "I know it's soon, perhaps too soon, but I can't imagine this place without you now. Every corner you've touched feels brighter." He took a deep breath. "I'm asking you to stay. Not as a guest, not as a helper, but as my wife." Joy bloomed in her chest, but caution tempered her response. "Xavier, are you certain? We've known each other such a short time." "I've never been more certain of anything." His eyes held hers steadily. "I love you, Theodora. I think I started falling the moment you stepped off that train, looking so brave despite being clearly terrified." She laughed softly. "Was it that obvious?" "To me it was." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You don't have to answer now. Take all the time you need." "I don't need time," she said, surprising herself with her certainty. "I love you too, Xavier. I want to build that home with you, fill it with laughter and love." His smile, rare and brilliant, transformed his face as he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. They were married 2 months later in the small church in Pine Ridge. Mrs. Wilkins cried through the entire ceremony, while Zeke stood proudly as Xavier's best man. The whole town turned out to celebrate, many expressing no surprise at the match. "Never seen two people more meant for each other," Mary whispered to Theodora at the reception. "The way he looks at you. Like you're his whole world." That night, as Xavier carried her across the threshold of the ranch house, their home, Theodora reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her west. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, setting her gently on her feet in their bedroom. "I was thinking about Joseph Harrison, and how his death seemed like such a tragedy for me at first." She wrapped her arms around Xavier's neck. "Now I see it was also the beginning of something beautiful. He would have been happy about this," Xavier said softly. "He always said the right people find their way to Harrison's heaven. I prefer Foster's heaven now," she teased, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Over the next year, Xavier and Theodora began implementing the expansion plans for the house. As the framework for the second story rose, so did news of Theodora's pregnancy, bringing jubilation to the entire ranch. "A home needs children's laughter," Xavier reminded her, his hand resting tenderly on her growing belly. Joseph was right about that. Their daughter, Emma, was born the following spring, a strong, healthy girl with her father's gray eyes and her mother's golden hair. Xavier proved to be a devoted father, often carrying the infant with him as he went about his less dangerous ranch duties. By Emma's first birthday, the house expansion was complete. The celebration served as both a birthday party and a housewarming, with friends and neighbors coming from miles around to join them. As twilight fell and the guests departed, Theodora found Xavier standing on the new front porch, gazing out at the land that had become their shared passion. Happy? She asked, slipping her arm around his waist. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. More than I ever thought possible. He glanced back at the house where their daughter slept peacefully. When you first arrived, I was afraid to hope for any of this. I just wanted to fulfill a promise to a good man. And now? Now I understand what Joseph meant when he called this place heaven. Xavier turned to face her fully. It's not the land or the house that makes it special. It's the love within it. Theodora smiled, remembering the lonely, frightened woman who had arrived on the dusty train platform 2 years earlier. When I came here, I thought I was just a temporary guest. Xavier's eyes crinkled with happiness as he echoed the words that had changed both their lives forever. This is your home too, Theodora. It always will be. As the stars appeared above Harrison's heaven, now truly Foster's heaven, Theodora leaned into her husband's embrace, secure in the knowledge that she had found not just a home, but a love that would last a lifetime.